What's your reaction when someone next to you is chewing with their mouth open? Whatever you just felt says a lot about the geographical context you were raised in, as well as the class aspirations baked into the etiquette norms you were taught. Because there's no such thing as one universal set of table manners. Much of what I'd internalized from American schools, like chewing as quietly as possible, keeping elbows off the table, using a fork and a knife, and putting them in a certain way when I'm done eating, has its roots in the European aristocracy dating back to the Renaissance. However, it's worth noting these were never fixed rules. In fact, the whole point was that they were a moving target, so the elite could readjust what counted as etiquette anytime they felt the lower and middle classes were catching on. The Victorian table is a classic example of this. One of the purposes of having so many pieces of silverware was that it made it near impossible for an outsider to get through a whole meal without committing some sort of faux pas. Personally, coming to Singapore showed me just how Western my understanding of table manners really was. For one, eating with your mouth open is not uncommon practice here. I found it seen as fairly neutral behavior. And I've learned it's not something children are reprimanded for in school. Not to mention, in certain parts of the world nearby, chewing loudly with your mouth open is actually a signal of enjoyment and compliment to the chef. So it's worth questioning that while we're told table manners are an act of consideration for others, who is it that gets to decide what considerate means? Because it's usually the person with the most social power in the room. And seeing that Western powers have largely dominated the corporate and wealth spheres globally, adopting Western table manners has also become its own kind of aspirational currency. And not complying means you might just be subject to ostracization, often in public. I mean, there's a whole genre of memes equating chewing with your mouth open with disgust. Not knowing how to handle a fork evokes a similar type of disdain. So, even though there may be no formal laws telling us how to eat, this set of informal policing is how hierarchies are clearly and visibly delineated. This sort of policing also leaves no room for the fact that some norms literally work at odds with certain people's bodies. Or maybe that's the point. One of my exes, for example, chewed with their mouth open. When we talked about it, they explained that when they chew with their mouth closed, they tend to bite their lip. Because growing up, their family wasn't able to afford the dental work needed to properly align their bottom jaw. Seeing how common this lack of what insurance calls cosmetic dental work is amongst lower SES families, these eating norms become additional punishment for circumstances that someone had no control over. So the next time you feel that reflex of judgment at the table, consider where you might have absorbed it, because that feeling didn't arrive neutrally, and it doesn't serve everyone equally.